Good evening, everyone. I hope you hear me clearly. Okay, so I'm not going to be long. I'm going to have like a 20-minute speech, and then after that, as it was meant as a roundtable, I hope we'll have a dialogue, Q&A, comments, and all of that. The first thing I'd like to say is that such a discussion would be almost impossible to have in Paris. The reason for this is that there is a general contextual element to Islamophobia, and there is a specific element to Islamophobia depending on the country that you're looking at. And one element of the French Islamophobia is that it is equally spread on the right wing and the left wing of the political game. So you'll find it very difficult to unite, to discuss with non-Muslim NGOs. You'll find very difficult to discuss the condition of Muslim women and the discriminations with the feminist NGOs. You'll find it very difficult to claim that you don't have to be a Muslim to understand the nature of Islamophobia. Like in another context, you don't have to be Jewish to fight against anti-Semitism. This is something that destroys the society at large and not only a specific community. We are at a specific time in our history, our European history. And what is this time? We are going through a crisis. And I'm not talking only about a financial crisis, an economic crisis. Economy is just one component of a much larger picture. And this picture is about who we are. Who are we as Europeans? What do we stand for? What defines us? Are we able to come up with a constructive, inclusive narrative that explains why are we living together? Because I don't know for you guys in London, but in Paris, we're in a situation where people live so close to each other physically that they are worlds apart. They share the tube, they take the metro together in the morning to go to the office. One of them is standing against the other, and the other one is sweating underneath the other, and so on and so forth. But they don't talk to each other. They live in the same building, and sometimes we have elderly people dying, and no one finding out for the next 3 weeks. We have people putting their parents in hospitals when they grow up, and feeling guilty only once a year when they know that it's Father's Day or Mother's Day. That's the society that we live in. And so the social distance between people is growing, and the distress among the society is growing as well. And people are suffering. There is a great deal of frustration. Some of them are losing their jobs, and even if they have a job, the situation is almost the same for a lot of us. We do jobs that we hate, with people that we hate, for companies that are meaningless and have absolutely no purpose. And so we are frustrated about this at some point. And so when someone comes on TV and says, look, I know why you are feeling threatened, that's because your identity is going away. And the reason why this identity is going away is that because someone is trying to invade Europe, and these guys are the Muslims, and they are threatening our freedom of speech, and they are threatening women's freedom, and they are backwards people, and they want to cut music and laughs and movies and all the stuff that you like. And these guys are so mean, and they have a beard. And so over time, you have like this typical right-wing rhetoric that says that Muslims and Islam are alien factors to the European identity, and we claim implicitly that this European identity is supposed to be white, Judeo-Christian, fixed and determined forever and cannot be changed. And this is so wrong. Identity, whether it be at the individual level or at the collective level, are perpetually recomposing. Perpetually. Even each one of us in his life story, we see that clearly we are changing. And there are so many contextual elements that participate in defining oneself that is impossible to define in a static manner what identity is. Also, the second thing we need to understand about identity is that concepts of identity are not mutually exclusive. I don't have to choose between being British or being Muslim. I don't have to choose being French or being Muslim. I don't have to choose. It's like if I was dividing among my love among my legitimacy, about my allegiance to a specific ID, to a specific country. It doesn't work like that. And so I can be equally as French as many other things. And I choose for myself the way I define myself. What drives me in life is this belief, this core belief, that there is good and there is bad, that there is meaning to things, that there is purpose in one's life. And that makes me a Muslim. I'm a French citizen. I have this sense of humor that is not relevant in the UK. I have this taste for words or for cakes that is not relevant in the UK as well. I have so many things that define me, my Egyptian cooking, my US style type of sneakers, my way of writing, and so many things that define myself. And the same goes for a country. If I ask the question, who are you, France? Who are you? What defines you? And so I've made the experience. I've spoke to colleagues, to neighbors, I've debated with many politicians, and I've said, okay, what do you stand for? What is it? What is France? And they will start their sentence invariably by, we are not this and this and this and that. Because their way of defining themselves is saying, that's what we're not, and that's what we're not. They are unable to define themselves in a constructive, positive narrative. They are defining themselves in denial of something else. And this denial, the people they want to get away from, the identity that they want to get away from, is this scarecrow type of icon. I don't want to be this Taliban. I don't want to be this Polish plumber. I don't want to be this Chinese worker in a factory. I don't want to be this hawkish American. That's what I don't want to be. And who I am is what I'm not. Is what I'm not. And so that's the core belief of the right-wing Islamophobia. That French or British or English or Italian doesn't mix with Islam. And any incursion of Islam, whether it be through physical presence, the citizens that are of Islamic religion, or through soft power, the influence that Islam might have in a society, all of this is perceived as a danger. Okay? The soft power I was mentioning is always at work. This is called, in economic terms, we would call it co-integration, i.e. when we live together, we always influence each other. Tell me who you spend your time with, and I'll tell you who you are. I'll tell you what you care for. I'll tell you the way you behave, because this is so much potent as a means of influence. So this soft power, what is it? It's the way we influence society with our ideas, and we are always doing this. We're always trying to convince our colleagues that chocolate chip cookie is much better than cranberries cookie. And that's why we're trying to push for this idea. We're campaigning every time we're in charge of that. We're always, we have political views or foreign policy views, and we're trying to push them forward, because that's what we stand for. And so this is always at work. And some of us are more efficient in doing this, or they choose a way that they do this in a more efficient manner. They will choose to campaign or participate in a political party or write books or make movies. And these are the tools of what I call soft power. And all of us are doing it, whether we say it explicitly or not. That's what having opinion is about. Now, a more subtle and dangerous form of Islamophobia is the left-wing Islamophobia. And this one comes with a positive idea. We are going to help out the Muslims. We are going to help them civilize. You will note, interestingly, that at colonial times, we also had this duality of intentions. One group was saying, we are going to, like, these people are so low in terms of race and culture. That's okay to colonize them. That's okay. We are much better than that. We own them. And the second thing was to say, look, poor guys, they are so backwards. We need to go and help them out. They are running naked in the forest. and look at the way they dress, and they don't even have like electricity, and they don't even have this and that. And so we need to help them out. We need to help them become like us. And so the same feeling is very active, very present in some parts of the left-wing political parties in France. And you'll find that the decisive moment in the 2004 law banning the hijab at school wasn't when right-wing extremists spoke or when Nicolas Sarkozy spoke. It was when the left-wing trade unions spoke and said, look, maybe there are some of the girls that are being forced to wear the hijab, so in order to help Muslim kids not to wear the hijab, we are going to ban it from school. Because of course it's a majority, and it's a fact that the brother, the father, the husband is forcing the girl to wear the hijab. So the initial intention that was presented was, how do we participate in freeing Muslim women, and the result is discriminating and banning Muslim women. Same goes with the feminism. Basically, I don't know for you girls or ladies, my definition of feminism is, how do we help women decide for themselves how they choose to live, how they choose to dress or undress, how they choose to work or not work, how they choose to stay at home or not stay at home, how they choose to become a professional photographer or travel around the world or take a PhD in biology or whatever. That's my definition of feminism. And I'm not in a legitimate position to decide for themselves what is good, and for them what is good and what is wrong. So you see that feminism in France is very, very efficient and very powerful. And this feminism, this form of feminism, is a unique mix that is exerted against the interest of these same women. So when a Muslim woman says, my free will, my choice is to wear a hijab, that's my choice, and my husband doesn't agree, or my father doesn't agree, so even within my family I have to explain this choice and fight for it. Okay? If you really want my freedom, respect this. Okay? And invariably, she will be faced with two attitudes. Number one is to say that, okay, she didn't decide for herself. She's been already brainwashed. So she's in such ideology, and social pressure is so huge that she doesn't even have a choice. She interiorized this, and she's submissive by essence. In any sort of situation, she will interiorize this. The second attitude is to say, okay, she has a political agenda, and she's using the hijab as a means to be subversive in the context. Okay, and if you look at these two attitudes, the childish woman who has no free will, or the evil woman who has a political agenda, are the two main excuses that we had at middle age to discard women from taking part in the society. I mean, 2, 3, 4 centuries ago, that was precisely the arguments used against them. Okay, and it's just amazing to see the same arguments coming back in the mouth of people who claim they help women. So these are elements that are specific to France. But what you have in the UK is the EDL being at the same stage as some right-wing extremist parties 10 years ago, 15 years ago in France. And so the great danger that you can still avoid in the UK is the spreading of these ideas in much more subtle forms. The danger of Islamophobia is not for extremists to have extremist speech. The danger of Islamophobia is when these ideas become mainstream. Because today it's cool to be an Islamophobic. It allows you to write books, to come on national TV and claim that, look, I've entered a mosque undercover, and they were saying very bad things, and they were saying that this person and this person was to be suppressed from everything. But I came back from it. I was heroic. I came back. I pretended I was praying, and so we have people in France now and then, every year, that publish books and documentary claiming this, and we've never heard of them. So me, even for the CCIF, I travel a lot in the country, and I go to every sort of mosque, Tablighi mosque, Salafi mosque, Ikhwani mosque, Turkish mosque, Naqshbandi mosque or new ways of influences within the Muslim community, and I've never heard in my life someone saying, well, let's plan this. I've just never heard of it. I've asked many brothers. I've said, okay, we're between us. Tell me, have you heard of it? Never ever. And so sometimes I'm just wondering, where do they get this from? So usually when the news, when TV, they call us and say, well, do you know if there are going to be some demonstrations? I say, well, no, but maybe for you we can organize one. Why do you say this? We say, because you call us not to know about like the state of Islamophobia or the number of discrimination that we have at school or the number of women that have been raped. You're not interested in that because you have our reports on the website. You just don't care much about that, but you're interested in showing some angry Muslim wearing short tops and Nike Air Max running around the place. That's what you're interested in. So why are you saying this? I said, because you're a movie maker. So you're doing your casting, looking for the good character. He has to have a beard. He has to speak French with a great Middle Eastern accent, and otherwise he's not credible for the role that you have designed for him. And the same goes here. The same goes here. You will find that you don't fit into the picture if you're British born or if you're born abroad, but you have completely integrated the codes of communication of the British society, that you stand for who you are in terms of identity, and at the same time you're able in any context to engage with your fellow citizen. You're not credible. You're not useful in this picture. So in the last few minutes, what we need to do is come at least with an action plan, with a way forward. Because thank God you're not yet at this stage in the UK. But what we find in France is that most of the Muslim community have interiorized this stigma, and they have a lot of frustration, And what we see, for example, is that a lot of them, when they have a good diploma or a good job, they just go abroad. And so you'll find that in London, you have a large French Muslim community living here, and they came just for this. All these sisters who have a PhD or an engineering degree and who cannot find a job in France, say, okay, what's the point? I've spent my whole life in France. I tried my best to participate in the society, but it just doesn't work. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life answering Islamophobic cliches. I want to have a family. I want to raise my children in a peaceful environment. I want another story for them, and so you'll find a lot of these people coming to the UK. For those who do not have this choice, well, they live in frustration and they interiorize some of these stigmas. So you will find that many sisters, when we ask them, why don't you study? Why don't you pursue your dream, your plan? So what's the point? What's the point of taking this diploma if I know in advance that I'm going to be discriminated against? What's the point? One of the main challenges in tackling Islamophobia is double. Number one, sharing Islamophobia as a common field, as a common fight with other fellow citizens, non-Muslims, other organizations, and explain that we are in the same fight for justice, and we have to fight whether this injustice target this community or that other community. There is no such thing as like local interest group at the expense of other communities. So that's number one. Number two, find efficient means to tackle Islamophobia, and instead of staying in a reactive, frustrated position, engage in the debate and propose a constructive, positive narrative that people can relate to. I'm going to take just two examples of initiatives, of actions put into their context. Number one, and I know a lot of you wanted to touch on this subject, is the cartoon crisis. And most of the, I'm just gonna finish with this. I think I'm gonna finish with this one. Okay, so easier. So I was saying, like in the last 4 weeks, I've been giving something like maybe 30, 40 interviews, 90% of which were focused on reacting on the cartoons published by Charlie Hebdo. And so nothing has changed in the country. We still have every day a hate crime against Muslims, every week a mosque or a cemetery that is assaulted or damaged. And clearly you see that what is interesting in the media is like this specific element of actuality. And so this is not the first time Charlie Hebdo publishes caricatures targeting Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. This is the third or fourth time, and every time it was even more offensive and more stigmatizing toward the Muslim community. And so the first times you'd see like the uncles, the traditional mosques, they have tried to file a lawsuit against the newspaper claiming that this is insulting to the Muslim community, and it didn't work because all the political sphere was backing Charlie Hebdo, and the Muslims appeared like they were emotionally irresponsible, that they were trying to react, and that they were a bit shaky in that respect. And they said basically that's freedom of speech against the Islamists. It just didn't work. All the artists were like supporting Charlie Hebdo. It was like in the 80s, I don't know if you remember, every time there would be a cause, some singers, they would come together in the studio and we are the world, and like everybody backing the same cause with like a fake commitment to the cause, just for the sake of like their public image, claiming that we participate in this stuff, that we're for freedom of expression. So anyone that has something to say on TV would back this campaign against the Muslims supporting Charlie Hebdo. So we clearly learned that this doesn't work on that ground. And after that, the next time they published, basically what we did is that with some friends, we gathered. Some of them were they do animation movies, or some of them are graphic artists, some of them are writers, and basically we created a fake newspaper imitating Charlie Hebdo. We called it Charlie Hebdo. And basically, we distributed 3 or 4 times more copies than Charlie Hebdo. And basically, the Charlie Hebdo that we created was making fun of Charlie Hebdo. And so we were claiming that, okay, if you're in despair for creativity, if you're in despair for ideas, if you don't have any decent sense of humor, that you laugh with people instead of laughing at them, maybe we can help you out. If you have like this lack of competency, maybe you can find it within the Muslim community instead of using them for selling newspapers. And for this third edition, what we did is that we looked at their financial situation, and we found that they were close to bankruptcy, and that every now and then they have to publish like a special edition targeting the Muslims, because they know that instead of selling 5,000 copies, they're going to sell 75,000 copies. And of course, this doesn't have any link with the content of the newspaper. We don't do it for the money. We do it for freedom of expression. So what we did is, instead of attacking them on the ground like we feel insulted, we said, okay, let's have a calm, determined attitude. What they say, what they draw, whatever they do is not going to diminish or increase in any way the status of Prophet Muhammad. And we Muslims are not going to feel damaged in our religion because some guys in their basement with pencil and papers have drawn something on the wall and claim that this is art. This is not going to change anything in our lives. So let's point at the actual motives behind these cartoons. To me, they are plainly and cynically economic motives. At the same time, we are in front of people that are not ideologists. They're just like French jackass, if you like, trying to experience like what can be provocative and stupid, and this is a way of like, let's be stupid and make money out of it. And so we shouldn't give it more significance or more importance than what it is. And so I had a debate in one of the shows for CNN that some of you might have seen, where I was debating the cartoonist of Charlie Hebdo. You can find it on the internet or you circulate it. But basically, the main argument is this lack of responsibility, because the stance of Charlie Hebdo is to say, well, we're just journalists and we're drawing pictures, and just the difference is that we do with the pencil what you do with the computer. Well, journalism comes with responsibility. If you admit that speech produces effect, then comes the idea of responsibility. Every one of us is responsible for what he says, for what he does. And those of us who have the right to public expression on TV, on radio, even more so, because every speech has an impact. Basically what I'm trying to do here is to raise awareness among us on this fact, is to come back home today with the idea that, okay, there is a situation here, but we're not going to let it go, and we are going to come together to help each other fight this. That's what I'm trying to do. So clearly I'm targeting an effect, I'm targeting, my speech has a purpose, has a name. Any one of us speaks for a reason. Otherwise we need to ask ourselves some questions. Okay, so the idea was to say that I don't think in any way that Charlie Hebdo is made of racist cartoonists. I don't think it's the case at all. I just think they don't realize what they are doing. Okay, but they participate in the building, in the normalization, in the mainstreamization, if you like, of Islamophobic ideas, because they maintain these cliches about Islam. And when we ask perpetrators, discriminants, why did you do this? Why did you do that? They say, well, Muslims are backward. I saw it in this movie. I saw it in that cartoon. I said, clearly you guys don't have any sense of humor, and that's why you deserve to be treated like that, and so on and so forth. And so these elements of popular culture, they participate in building progressively the fact that it's normal to have such ideas, such prejudice, such cliches about Islam and the Muslims. And so we cannot deny this responsibility, and we found that it's more efficient to be cold, determine, and tackle them on another front, on the cultural front, on the economic front, on the ideological front, rather than keeping ourselves in a victim situation where we're saying, look at it, these are means that they're throwing on us, please help us out. This doesn't work. And now, with the help of other organizations internationally, in November we are going to launch an international campaign against Islamophobia. And the idea is to have a very professional approach to it, and produce a number of artworks, a number of videos, a number of articles that tackle cliches. And they have to respect a number of guidelines. So you'll see more about Enough Coalition in the next few weeks, that they will be planning their own part of the campaign, their own events. They are still determining the modalities of it. But what we are doing in France is having different guidelines for this. Number one, has to be open, has to speak to the wider society. It's not a community-specific campaign. Number two, it has to be of a professional standard. It has to be nice looking, it has to be very precise, it has to have a good message that is efficient and has an impact. Number three, it has to have an artistic tone. And number four, it has to be positive. It doesn't have to put people in a frustrating position. It has to open the debate rather than being a reinforcement in this antagonism that we're pushing us into. Okay, so these are the two initiatives that we had recently. Number one, the cartoon response that is finished now. I hope it's finished. Number two, what is the way forward? Well, speaking to the rest of the society, engaging to a debate, because this discussion that we have, as I said in the beginning, we don't have any of them in France, any of them. When I give a conference, it's going to be in a university in a very tense situation, or I'm going to be debating very aggressively with a right-wing extremist. And there is very little room for discussion. And those of you who are engaged in political organization in the UK, predominantly on the left wing, you will find that now these debates are starting to become difficult to have even within the party. You will see division among people from the same organization. Some of them want to be part of this cause. Some others, they will say, well, we're not backing any religious fight. Well, this is not a religious fight. This is a fight for justice. And every one of us should recognize that. Thank you.
It was very interesting, and very thought-provoking to hear Brother Marwan, especially depicting the context in France, and it reminded me of the sort of late 70s, early 80s in this country, I think, when we were afraid of taking a stand, not afraid to take a stand, but afraid of the consequences. I think that's how I would say that. And it also reminded me of the fact that how far we've come in this country, and that we should be really honoring all of those people who, you know, on whose giant shoulder we stand, with all the work that they have done to ensure that at least the fascist rallies, the fascist groups know that they have people who will oppose them very strong, very firmly. I think that there is a lot that we can do to ensure that there is a collective response globally. I think that for far too long, we've all been sort of colonized, if you like, in our own countries to a certain extent, and responded only within the boundary of our countries. And because racism, prejudice, injustice is so overwhelming that it's not surprising when you're struggling every day to ensure that you get justice for yourself, for your family, for your communities, for society at large. I just want to say that I think we've had our moments of cartoons. I mean, well, before the cartoons, cartoon is the latest frenzy of attacks against Islam and against our religion, but also against Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. So I think we've got a little bit more used to it, and I think that's one of the reasons you haven't seen people getting to the streets and really be angry, because we have found many other ways of tackling some of these strategies. I know what you say about it being economy. I think it's also a strategy. It's in England anyway, it's a systematic, brutal strategy to ensure that one by one key Muslims are ticked off in the media, that they are attacked when they're speaking, that they will only allow, it's not just the feminist movement, sadly, and not just the leftists either. We put up with both of them, both of those kind of groups for a long time. I could do without this. My voice, Allah has blessed me, really loud voice, but anyway. But I think that it's not just that. I think that we have really come to understand what some of the bigger agendas are, and then I think many of us have utilized some of the groups that we are working with, our connections with different institutions, our connections with different individuals, and thank God, you know, that we do have people who are willing to take up the mantle against racism, against Islamophobia. Not so much about Islamophobia. Anyway, I don't want to, I mean, I can go on and on and on about this issue, but that's because I come from East End of London, and you know that this is where it always happens. But I do want to remind us that even, every time I mention that name, I cringe. I want to find an alternative. Oh, actually, the alternative is we've got the revision of the author, you know, who was made so well famous by our intervention and our interjections and our thoughtlessness. I think that your point, Brother Marwan, is very important. Every time we respond, we have to know the consequences of our response on the wider audience and on the wider community and the global world. So I think that it's really important that we do not make people individual famous for the sake of it, simply because some of us have let emotions run away with. And I understand that. I mean, you know, I'm a mother of 5 children, 4 sons. I've got grandchildren, and I know that, you know, although I tried my very best to bring up children that are not going to be angry and violent as a, you know, sort of in response, but I tell you, they're angry and violent in private very often about this, and I get really worked up, and I have to remind myself not to be angry so that I don't give a different message to my children. So I think that it is very difficult. And finally, the point that I want to share with you, about the issue of women and feminism. It's something that I have struggled with all my life in the struggles as an activist, and especially as someone who have always never run away from my faith. I mean, I've not always had a scarf on, but I've always been very, I've always identified myself as a woman who's Muslim, who's very keen to ensure that when we're working on any struggles that we work with men, and feminism and feminists in the UK and elsewhere have never allowed a space for Muslim women who are very strong, who have their own opinions, who are certain of their faith, who are certain of their place in societies, who will speak the language that they will speak as equally confident. And so I know the concept about being brainwashed or being feeble and weak and not knowing your mind or being forced to do something. I understand those arguments, but I think that's an argument that's been lost on feminism. And I think that the numbers of very passionate and very vocal women, not just in this country, I'm sure in France, and right across the globe, the Arab Revolution is shown some of them and some of the resistance. And in fact, what we've had to do is build up our own small resistant movement in ensuring that we survive the country in which we live and many of our children are born. So I think that's okay, because that means that it's a healthy society that we live in. And of course, you know, I've always said this, that Britain does, for all its glory about, you know, small snippets of it forgetting its multicultural and multi-faith society, it is a place where we can have a voice. It's very important. And so I really welcome what you said about the campaign, and I hope we can do something very significant and very visible. And I think you're absolutely right. It has to be absolutely professional, because that's the way that you know, our Jewish brothers have won their argument, and we've learned very little often from their strategies. And finally, I think I would just say that we've got to make sure that we embed and amend laws to take on board that religious hatred is, you know, Islamophobia, and we've got to make sure that Islamophobia is much, we stand against Islamophobia as much as anti-Semitism. I think that if we can coalesce with others like you're saying, then I think that we have a battle less, and we can be less worn as a result. So anyway, thank you very much for all the work that you do, and we're here, and we should connect and coalesce much more, because that is what's going to defeat those who are Islamophobe, those who are fascist, and those who are against justice and equality. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Just reflecting on the issue of videos and the cartoons in the last few weeks made me think just what a relentless form of oppression Islamophobia is. It strikes me it's kind of racism to the power of three, really. It's kind of triple-tiered bind that they get Muslims in. First of all, Muslim countries are being bombed and attacked and invaded by the West. Second, because of that, the atmosphere that those attacks create, there's a series of insulting, all sorts of different kind of insulting literature, videos, cartoons in the media that are unleashed on the Muslim population. And then thirdly, when people protest and take to the streets against these humiliations, they're blamed once again. There's a third wave of outrage. How dare these people get into the streets and protest? Why can't they participate in a sensible and civilised conversation? It's just never ending. And you know, I think there's actually a fourth twist as well, which is that the wider Muslim community, the so-called moderate Muslims, are then taken to task for not dealing with the so-called extremists. So, you know, I mean, it's a real complex that is unleashed on the Muslim community and has a very, very confusing effect, I think. both on the victims but also on wider society. And I think Marwan is absolutely right to raise the question of blame, because in the end of the day we have to decide who is to blame for this situation, and they're constantly trying to divert the blame in different directions. And I actually do agree as well with Marwan that it's actually not the far right that is the main issue. Clearly the EDL in this country is a horrible, racist, partially Nazi organisation, and it's absolutely right to protest against them and to drive them out of our communities. But I don't think they're the cause. I think they're a symptom, actually. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we strategise. It seems to me that, unfortunately, and in contrast actually to virulent racism in the 1970s in Britain, which by and large did come from the far right originally, in contrast to that, Islamophobia is a racism of the establishment. It comes from the Tory party, it comes from the Lib Dems, actually it comes from sections of the Labour Party, unfortunately. It comes from the mainstream media. Every day, the tabloids carry demonisation, vilification, horrible slurs and criminalisation of the Muslim community. It comes from the police. Let's be honest, look at the statistics. Day in, day out, Muslim youth are humiliated and persecuted by the police in a systematic way. It's not one or two bad apples. The police are Islamophobic to the core. It comes from the judicial system. It's very, very deeply rooted in the kind of official hierarchies of our society. And I think, you know, we have to grasp that if we're to think about seriously how we can tackle it. So I don't want to be pessimistic and sound really gloomy. So I'll end on just 2 points. One is that, I mean, I think, you know, in a way, to say that it comes from the elites is also to say that actually there's a huge amount of opposition to it, not just from the Muslim communities, but from wider British society, and that's very heartening. And I think the anti-war movement has been a kind of articulation of that, actually, and has helped to encourage that to some extent. But I think the reason that we've kind of been involved in setting up the Enough Coalition is because we do need to campaign very, very seriously. We need to campaign on all fronts. We need to put an argument to wider society, not just that Islamophobia is wrong, but that it's a form of racism and that it's something that we have to actively fight. We have to campaign against it. And sometimes that'll be having conferences, and I think the November Islamophobia Awareness Month is a fantastic idea, and I'm very, very glad that's happening, and it'll be very, very useful as a way of mobilising and coordinating. Sometimes we'll have to get out in the streets. I mean, I think when we've built up our forces a bit, we should say next time the Express runs some sort of scurrilous attack on Muslims in one form or another, we should get down to the Express offices and we should protest outside it. I think those are the kind of things that we need to do.
Yes, please.
You know, as well as winning arguments. And you know, obviously one of the reasons why this meeting isn't bigger, by the way, is because there's a protest outside the High Court because of the absolute outrage of what has happened to Badr Ahmed and Talar Hassan, which is, you know, just one more symptom of the extent to which this is rooted in our establishment. I mean, our legal system and so forth. I mean, it's obviously an absolute outrage. So, I mean, that's my main message. I would just end on one last thing, which is I do think as well, and it's connected, that one of the reasons why Islamophobia has become so much the main racism in British society is because it's a form of war propaganda. They're fighting wars in the Middle East and in Central Asia that they know are deeply unpopular with our own population. In Britain, 80% of the British population think the Afghan war has been a waste of lives and money. So they have to find a way to justify it, and they justify it by demonising Muslims and creating this idea that Muslims are uncivilised and barbaric and half of them are terrorists and therefore we have to go and bomb them. And that's really, there is a really tight connection there. So I think as well as campaigning in the most strongest possible terms and in the most militant way we can against Islamophobia, we also have to continue the campaign against the war. And this weekend is the 11th anniversary of the invasion of Afghanistan, and there's going to be a naming of the dead ceremony in Trafalgar Square on Sunday at 1 o'clock, which will be led by Afghans, but also significantly by military families who have lost people in Afghanistan. And I think the tide is turning over Afghanistan, and one of the things we can do to help all this is to get the troops back. We're saying bring them home by Christmas, which isn't a very Muslim thing to say, but nevertheless it's quite important. Thanks very much.